Welcome to the entry-level driver training certification course, phase 2. By now, you've got a pretty good idea of what we're going to be training. Some of the things that we've traditionally not trained on in the past, as for new drivers, we've covered in safety meetings. We're going to teach new drivers all those items before they ever get behind the wheel of a commercial vehicle transporting passengers. This is an exciting time to be at the forefront of new training opportunities. So School Bus Safety Company, again, you're all familiar with this by now. We log in. During the phase 1 meeting, I encouraged you to take notes. This would be an opportunity to ask your manager questions, talk if it's a group of trainers, talk to those. If you're a trainer at a small location and it's just you, talk to your manager, to reach out to me. I'm Sean Woods at the home office, or safety or operations team can help you with any questions that you have. First thing I want to do is kind of review some of the key elements that you watched in modules. The modules covered a great deal of topics. The safety best practice video that we reviewed together and then you watched to get on your own provided an opportunity to understand what safety is, what risk is, personal accountability, how we can leverage personal accountability to ensure we have safer passengers, safer drivers, safer vehicles. Anytime there's an accident involving the school bus, typically the damage inflicted on the other vehicle is much greater than that that's inflicted on the school bus. Some of the engineering things that have been built into school buses enable that: higher off the ground, reinforced steel frames, bumpers, versus vehicles that are lower to the ground, fiberglass. So really teaching trainees that not only are we worried about the safe transportation of our students, understanding what risk is and how much damage we can inflict on other vehicles, that speed plays an important part in that, following distance. We need to give ourselves as much time to react to other motorists as possible. We can only do that by increasing our following distance, reducing our speed, and understanding risk and societal norms, and then developing safe habits that reduce that risk, extend that 300 out to 400, 500, 600 as part of that 329.1 that we covered in safety best practices. Now, you've watched a lot of modules, had a great deal of information put on your plate. Now I want to take time to reinforce a couple of items. We should be issuing the CDL written test modules to all drivers, not handing them a permit manual. If you're the one that is doing that type of training, or if your manager has been handing out CDL manuals, let's stop doing that. Let's make sure that we issue these. As you've seen, they're great, instructional. They're built to help them shorten that window, like we talked about in phase 1, to get to be a licensed driver, making money, which will ultimately reduce pipeline losses. The higher quality drivers that we have will reduce the losses that we have for veteran drivers. There's going to be folks that leave. Maybe the part-time nature of school bus driving no longer works for them. But if we can have drivers that are more confident day one transporting students, they're more likely to stay. So given that, what I'd like you to think about is your first day ever driving a school bus with kids on board. Maybe that was 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 20 years ago. Let's think back to that first day. Was it a stress-free, calm, relaxing environment? For most of us, I would say the answer is no. For me personally, it was something I had never had experience with. I'd substitute taught in the past. But to be operating a vehicle, my back to all the students, something that big, not knowing a route, in the morning, dark, predetermined stops to find, it was just a different type of situation. So our goal is to make sure that that day is less stressful for new drivers going forward. It all starts with getting them permitted as quickly as possible to shorten that 14-day wait period that DOT has before they can go and they're eligible to take their test. Having them complete all the modules. We'll go through the course syllabus here in just a few minutes. What we've done is we've taken two of the phases that we have to train on, theory and behind the wheel range, and we've kind of broken those up. The syllabus we're going to review is based on a normal school year, normal training day, 3-hour training process. And it's important to note that if it's holiday break, if it's summertime, the amount of time we spend per day training can be as much as we want. It can be an 8-hour training day. We don't have to do it 3 hours at a time. We have to make sure some benchmarks are in place. They have to have an MVR background check, complete the drug screen before they ever operate a bus. But outside of that, we can combine multiple days of theory and range and do multiple things if we don't have school. Most of our locations train from 9 to noon after routes. They end in enough time for a trainer to grab some lunch before PM routes start. So the syllabus we're going to go over is set on that traditional structure of school operations. So you've gone through and you've done all of these modules. It's important to note that each driver is going to have student management training prior to transporting students, extreme student management, power line safety, emergency evacuations, just so much information that we've got to try to make it personal while we're training it. We've got to give them examples. So for emergency evacuations, we talk to them about while you're on your route, think of if a tornado siren goes off or a tornado happens, or you come across a bridge that's got water over it, what do you do? Where do you go? So they're not thinking about these things for the first time when they happen. They've already got a plan. If we have a plan prior to, we'll be in a much better position to have safe students. Excuse me. Again, I want to show you, and you've seen several times throughout the different modules, the safety management system poster. You need to keep referring back to this. Carry one with you in your training folder. Put it in what we're going to go over here in a minute, the behind the wheel guide, so you can keep referring back to this. We've got a couple of processes that you may not be familiar with that we're going to go over with, commentary driving and LLC driving. It's a great opportunity to reinforce the 22 safe practices by identifying unsafe behaviors. So as part of phase 2, I'd like to show you the syllabus. This is the 3-hour-a-day training breakdown that I was describing to you for this syllabus. Some of the prerequisites: they have to clear MVR and background check to start training. They have to take all written tests 2 times each. Now, this is for states where trainees can go and take tests for free. Many states that have 4 written tests. There's no particular order they have to take them in. They can take all 4 written tests twice per day. Other states, they have to pass general knowledge first. There's a fee associated with every time they take a test. So based on your state, this may require a different tactic. We may have to issue them all of the CDL modules in School Bus Safety Company and have them go through all of those before they go down and take the written test. But ideally, they take all of their written tests. Then they would enter the training process. Training process starts with classroom. It's safety best practices video that you've done a couple of times now with LLC defensive driving. What we've done is we've broken these down. They're going to have classroom, then they'll have range, then they'll have homework. They'll have modules assigned to them as homework, and those are typically items that don't need a whole lot of elaboration on. The items that require district specifics or additional details from a trainer, location specific, we'll do in a classroom setting. They need to be with a trainer that's knowledgeable, that meets the requirements, which is they have held the license class with all applicable endorsements that they're going to train on for at least 2 years. All of these items have to be, these modules have to be shown to the trainees. And that may look different depending on the location. You may not have, some locations don't have physical buildings. It may be on a school bus with a laptop. It may be in a classroom in a school. It may be in a library. It may be in a physical classroom at the location. So whatever we need to do, let's work with location management, with me. We'll get those, any items that are needed identified so you can be successful in training new trainees. So the typical day breaks down pretty much the same way. We start with classroom. In the beginning, the first couple of days are heavy on classroom. Then they do their homework. The next day begins with a review of the previous day. So you'd start in classroom saying, do you have any questions over what you watched last night for homework? If there's certain items you want to reinforce from day one on day two, you have 10 minutes to do that at the beginning of the day. So day one, they'll go take all their written tests. In a perfect world, they've passed all their written tests by the end of day 3. I'm not going to go through every single day, but I want you to understand the structure during the normal school year of what it looks like. So if you are at a smaller location and you're doing the classroom training, you're doing the range training, and you're doing the road training, it'll be one person going through all of this. The normal adult person doesn't have an attention span to sit in a classroom setting for 3 hours. The same way where if you're out doing pre-trip on the lot and you do pre-trip for 3 hours, they've probably zoned out after the first 30 to 45 minutes. So what we've done is we've broken that down into smaller pieces. Every day builds up to the next day. We tried to take a very methodical approach to this. By doing the CDL modules first, they'll be more apt to recall and retain more information while doing the pre-trip. So it's going to take less time on the pre-trip. We can spend more time actually operating a commercial vehicle, going through scenarios. The one thing I want you to consider is we never want to be just teaching one thing. With following distance, when we talk about 4 seconds, again, we want to park a bus 40 feet off the bumper of another bus to show them what 4 seconds is. So we're not just saying it, we're showing it. And we want to do that with everything we do. So mirror adjustments and reference points, same thing. They're going to watch a video in classroom, and then we want to show them when they get on the bus what it looks like with properly adjusted mirrors and then improperly adjusted mirrors. So we review day one, watch a few videos, meet the bus, intersections, mirror adjustments. Then we take them around, tour the facility. That may be short. If you don't have a physical location, that's going to be a short tour. If you have a facility and you have multiple layers, we want to show them where everything's at, including where to get forms, where the restrooms are, what the protocols are, and then introduce them to everybody you come across. One of the big downfalls to student transportation is a lot of times drivers feel like they're on an island by themselves. They may come across the same couple of people that check in with them every day, and they don't realize just how many folks there are, especially at a large terminal. At safety meetings, they may get an idea, but they don't know folks. It may take several years for them to get to where they feel like they know their colleagues. We can help with that. If we take them around the lot and we come across managers, dispatchers, mechanics, other drivers, attendants, fuelers, whoever it is, introduce them. They're going to feel a part of the team. They're more likely to stay and finish the training process. And also, once they get on their own, they're going to feel like they have people they can talk to. We want to start that. We want to start that mentoring process where if they have a driver that they've been introduced to, they're more likely to walk up to them and say, "Hey, I've had this problem on my bus with this student. Have you come across this?" All those things are going to lead to better drivers, drivers that want to stay, drivers that are happy in their position, drivers that feel like they have somebody they can talk to, and ultimately help with any type of shortages the industry may have. So this is day 2. We go out to the range. We show them the pre-trip, 3 full pre-trip inspections, right? It's repetition. They're not telling us, we're telling them, we're showing them around. We show them 2 full brake tests. They've seen it, they've touched it, they've gone through the CDL modules, so they have an idea of what a lot of these things are. And now it's going to start putting things together. Then they'll go down and take the remaining written tests. They'll do a DOT physical. One of the key distinctions with the introduction of the FMCSA clearinghouse that we all have to register for as commercial drivers, we cannot federally drug test a new employee until they are either a CLP, which is a commercial learner's permit, or a CDL, a commercial driver's license holder. So at this time, we can only give them a physical. Some states require a DOT physical in order to get a permit issued. So again, this is going to take some flexibility based on your state specific requirements. But typically on day 2, they'll go for a physical. Then that night they'll go home and they'll watch they'll do some homework. They'll have the Apple Bus Company drug and alcohol policy, the safety program manual. Let them know there's 20 minutes put on here for those. They don't need to memorize the drug and alcohol policy or the safety program manual policy. That's a 60-page document, 60+ page document. The key takeaway from this is that they need to know that they have access to it. They can go back to it at any time through School Bus Safety Company, access that program manual, access the drug and alcohol policy if they have any questions. They're going to watch safe backing, railroad crossings, and they're going to study any unpassed CDL permit sections as homework. The reason why we don't do railroad crossings in classroom, it's important. They're going to watch the video. The video is very specific, but we're going to have plenty of time when we do behind the wheel range and road to go through railroad crossings. So there's going to be no questions about how to properly conduct railroad procedures. Each day goes like that for the first few days. We review the previous day. They have classroom, they have range, and they have homework. Day 4, in a perfect world, they would have passed all written tests on day 3. While we're en route on day 4, they go get issued their permit. That way, that afternoon, they can go down and do their drug screen. Again, they can't operate a CMV until we've gotten their drug screen. The difference between range and road is a distinction that we need to clarify. Range is a controlled environment. Road is just as it sounds. It's behind the wheel in its traditional sense. It's out on public roads with other vehicles. What has happened in the past, and not just specific to school bus training, is as soon as somebody gets their permit and clears their drug screen, we've been sick and tired of doing permit training. So we want to get them out on the road to break the monotony, and they've never operated a school bus. It's not a very good idea that the first time somebody operates a commercial vehicle as large as a school bus, it's with other motorists. So the idea of range is in a controlled environment. They learn things like reference points, maneuvering, turning radius, all these things before they're ever on the road with other motorists. So identify a place at your location within reasonable distance where you can have a controlled environment. Maybe you have a lot large enough to be able to do range. Maybe you have a substantial population in your town and you have a large public park that during winter months especially has very small attendance at those parks with multiple parking lots where we could drive, and it's a relatively controlled environment. You would drive them, you'd be the driver to that park, and then once you get to the park, then they would take over and they would do the driving around the controlled environment. Always remember that a permit holder cannot transport passengers other than a trainer or another trainee. So that's the important distinction between range and road. So day 5 is the first day that they're going to actually be operating a school bus, and it's on range in a controlled environment. Day 6 continues much of the same. We review the previous day. We watch student management in a classroom. This is where you can elaborate. We don't want to elaborate too much, but we want to give them specific experiences as much as possible, but we've got to be cognizant of time. The longer it's easy to get off on tangents and spend 3 hours on student management, and that would eat up the whole day, and they wouldn't be able to progress to the range portion for that day. So day 5 also introduces commentary driving. We'll get into some of the specifics on commentary driving here in just a little bit. For homework, checking for children post-trip, very important topic. Again, that video stands on its own. They drive the point across. You need to be knowledgeable about the syllabus though. If your location has specific child check requirements, like the placards you put up in the back of the bus, the review of day 6, you would need to go over those requirements with your trainees. We do extreme student behavior. So we start with student management on day 6. On day 7, it builds. They've got some basics. We talk about extreme. We continue with pre-trip for 30 minutes. By this time, they're getting a pretty good handle on it. Then we go into road driving. Now, this is under the assumption that they did their drug screen on day 4, and we've gotten it back by day 7. You'll need to check with your manager or your hiring manager and ensure that they've received clearance for the drug screen before we proceed to the road training. If they have not, we continue with range and classroom. We've got some buffers built in to this 10-day syllabus where we have some additional time that we can do this. And another important thing to note, at the beginning of training, it's important to get a verbal confirmation that your trainee will make every effort to be here every day of training. Let them know that, listen, this is a very robust training course. What you're about to embark on is going to be challenging, but very rewarding. It's a 10-day training program. The day you get permitted, if you get permitted on day 4 with a 14-day waiting period, that essentially takes us to day 18. Okay? According to this 10-day syllabus, day 4 leaves 6 days to day 10. So this would still leave us 12 days to make that 18-day. So we've got some time after this to where if they do miss a couple of days, it's built in, but we want to let them know that it's very important that we stay. In a perfect world, we stay along this syllabus. At the end of day 10 on the syllabus, they're 100% ready to go. We may bring them in the day before their test and just go over and review things with them. If you have multiple trainees and you have one trainee that calls in 3 out of the 10 days, but the other trainees in attendance all 10 days, it creates some challenges. But this is where the multiple sessions between classroom, road, and range, if you have the ability with multiple trainers, you can have some flexibility there. You can start that at second person in a second shift that comes in. First trainee starts at 9, second trainee comes in at 10:30 or 11, and you essentially run 2 training sessions to account for any missed days. But if we can get a verbal commitment that they will make every effort to attend every day of training, they're less likely to just miss. They're more likely to take it seriously if we set that expectation at the beginning. Okay, so it goes on each day. Another change that I would like to identify with you all. The training documentation forms, we still have 2 forms. They've changed with the ELDT requirement, but FMCSA for driver qualification files require that there's a final evaluation on file for that driver. There have been locations in the past that have done that prior to the driver going to take their CDL exam. I understand the purpose behind it. It's essentially a trainer saying, yes, this driver's ready to go take their test. We're going to shift just a little bit. We're going to shift that to after their CDL. So they complete our 10-day training program. They go, they take their CDL exam, they pass first time on pre-trip, on skills, and on driving. Then they come back and they do a final evaluation with a trainer. So in theory, we could have somebody that's qualified to operate a commercial vehicle, a school bus, but fails their final road exam with their trainer and can't transport children. That is a very important distinction to make. As a trainer, you have the ability to say, yes, this person is capable of operating a school bus and transporting students. It's an awesome responsibility, and this gives you direct input on when that person starts transporting children. We've also got to consider that we've invested a lot of time, you've invested a lot of time, energy, money, all types of resources into these trainees. There are times, as you learned in the How to Teach the Adult Learner, where there's personality conflicts. So just because a final evaluation is failed doesn't necessarily mean that that person will not be a school bus driver. What that is an opportunity to have a discussion with your management team. Maybe if they go out and do a review, a final evaluation with that driver, you all compare notes. We identify areas that need to be improved. We do additional training, and then that person goes out and does another final evaluation, right? We're coaching and we're educating people. People don't always perform exceptional in the moment. Some people are just bad test takers, and we have to continue to teach them beyond just what the basic training is. So keep those things in mind. Also, what we like to do is we would like to have an observation period with children where a trainer observes. This may not always be practical, but this is what we'd like to do in a perfect world. The next thing is we'd like to observe that person on route with children for 2.5 or more days, a total of 6 routes. So if the trainer observes an AM route on Monday with the driver, and then a sub driver that's been driving a route for 2 months rides with the newly licensed commercial driver Monday afternoon, Tuesday AM and PM, and Wednesday AM and PM on the route that person's going to be taking. That's a total of 6 routes with an additional commercial driver that new driver has had experience on. Once they're finally on their own, they're going to feel a lot more confident than if they were to operate a school bus and transport students as soon as they were licensed. So those are the items we want to keep in mind. So that's the syllabus under a perfect world. I want to reiterate, this is when school is in session based on a 3-hour training day and everything lining up just perfectly. We've got some buffers in place. If it takes a little longer for a trainee to get their permit, if it takes a little longer for a background check, if it takes a little longer for a drug screen, we've got some extra days built in at the end between day 10 of the finalized training and when their 14-day waiting period for DOT takes effect. Okay, now we're going to switch over to the Behind the Wheel Trainer's Guide. This guide is step-by-step how to teach behind the wheel. It breaks down range, road, it describes exactly what proficiency looks like. It also describes exactly what failure looks like. Each of you should have one of these. If you do not, talk to your location manager. It's very important that you get familiar with this. The expectation is not that you memorize it all before you take a trainee. The expectation is that you get familiar with it and that you carry this with you, especially for your first few trainees. You carry this with you and you can read as they're doing things and talk them through. You can understand proficiency, failure, and it's very black and white. It's very clear on what you need to be doing. So we're not going to go over the whole thing. If we look through here, the skills course that we're going to be teaching may be a little different than what you've typically done, where this is going to be significantly focused on reference points. Traditionally in the past, lot skills has been, we set up a box. We say, when you see this cone, something to the effect of, when you see this cone in this mirror, turn your wheel hard. What that is doing is teaching cones. Those don't really apply when you're out on the road on a route and you get stuck in a situation. So our training going forward is going to require a shift and a pivot from what you've typically done. The skills course will be judgment stops, right and left side backing, right turn, left turn, diminishing lane, railroad crossings, and then a serpentine going forward and back. Our behind the wheel driving standards that they need to do, and they'll practice this both range and road. Of course, is pre-trip, mirror and adjustment, use of the accelerator, braking as we go through these right turns, left turns, backing, lane changing. It is significant. Lift operations. We don't typically go through lift operations when we're training an entry-level driver. That's in our special needs program, along with mobility securement. But checking for children, similar to the 4 foot or 4 seconds of following distance, where every day the trainee gets on the bus, we park it 40 feet off of a bus in front of us. We need to make sure that anytime a driver trainee gets onto a school bus, they do a child check before they get off. And they don't just go back and push the button. They actually look for sleeping children, left items, or damage. You can get as creative with that as you want. You can leave a backpack somewhere or something and see if they find it. But we need to make sure that we are reinforcing that every single day. Leaving a child on the school bus unattended is one of the things that there's no coming back from as a school bus driver. So many negatives can come from that. We need to ensure that every time that a driver is getting off their bus, they're doing a child check every time, and we can do that by reinforcing it in training. And then commentary driving is a very powerful tool. If you're not familiar with it, please read up on the LLC defensive driving and commentary driving sections of this manual. It also goes into course setup. There's diagrams on how to set up each skill. An important note, this manual refers to, and some of the modules refer to, a classroom trainer's guide. Since we've gone with a learning management system that's completely web-based, we're not going to be using classroom trainer's guides. Those are primarily for CD. School Bus Safety Company offers a library of CDs, and the classroom trainer's guide tells you when to put a certain CD in, what to cover, when to put the next CD in, things like that. We've taken it a step further, done a completely web-based that eliminates the need for a classroom trainer's guide. So in phase 2, what we want to do is ensure you don't have any questions over the modules. You've thought about how you're going to teach them, how you can reinforce them. And then we want to go through and get familiar with how to set up the course, how to teach some of these elements, read through this manual, and then go out and practice setting up lot skills based on our new items or the additional items we're going to be teaching in lot skills. A right-hand turn has different hazards than a left-hand turn. As you saw in the modules, one of the main hazards for a left-hand turn is pedestrians. A right-hand turn presents significant hazards. There may be electrical boxes, power lines, fire hydrants, pedestrians, curbs, traffic that's coming in a left-hand turn lane in the direction you're trying to turn. So by teaching these skills in a controlled environment on range, we are going to really set our new drivers up for success. And then reinforcing that if in doubt, don't. As we go through diminishing lane, serpentines, and right and left turns, we need to also be telling them, if in doubt, don't. If you're making a right-hand turn and you don't think you can make it, stop. Let traffic clear out around you, because it will. Understand that any external pressures that you may be feeling by other motorists will only get exacerbated if you continue and hit something. If you just stop right there, you may get people honking at you, whatever it is. But ultimately, traffic will clear out. A car will stop far enough back to where you can make the turn. Let them know that. If they know that before they ever get behind the wheel of the school bus, they'll be more than likely to make the right decision and minimize risk when they're on their own and there's nobody there to help them. I'd like to focus on commentary driving and LLC defensive driving and make a distinction between the two. Commentary driving is when a person's in the driver's seat and they're verbalizing everything they come across. I'm coming up to a stale green light. I'm letting off the accelerator. I'm covering the brake. The light is changing to yellow. I'm applying pressure to the brake. I'm checking my mirrors, see who's behind me, right? We're verbalizing everything. I need to change lanes. I'm turning on my left turn signal. I'm looking in my mirror, checking for traffic. There's a car to my left. I'm looking in my overhead mirror, checking on my students real quickly, going back to my left mirror. The car's just passed me. I'm merging. They're verbalizing everything they come across. LLC defensive driving is using the look ahead, look around, leave room, and communicate methodology to verbally communicate defensive driving with a focus on what other motorists are doing. We want to get people in the habit of verbalizing what they're coming across. And then we can comment on it. And then when we get to those sections, it says specifically what failure looks like and what proficiency looks like. It breaks it down. So go read through those sections. We're going to do both of those in range to get the trainee comfortable with the process before we get them out on the road. And it may seem ridiculous if you're just driving in a circle around the lot, if you have a large bus lot, doing commentary and LLC defensive driving, but we want to get them accustomed to talking while they're processing information before they're on the road with other motorists. So those are two very critical practices to get for you as a driver trainer to get proficient at before you take on a trainee and you start teaching it. Phase 2 is essentially this. It's going through this manual. It's making sure you're confident with all the elements of phase 1, all the modules. You're confident with setting up lot skills, with teaching it based on reference points, going through each reference point, understanding how to set it up, how to teach it, what mirrors to look through. So maybe it's getting with your manager if you're at a small location and working through the process with them, an additional driver so that you can help practice, because the additional driver, even a veteran driver, may not have ever been taught this way. So if you're at a small location, talk to your manager, see if you can bring another driver on to help you go through these processes. If you're at a large location, Pair up with another trainer and you guys work through these processes together. Practice commentary driving, practice triple LC defensive driving, practice setting up the skills course, and then practice teaching each other the skill. That is phase 2. If there's anything you need from phase 2, any questions, comments, concerns, talk to your location manager, reach out to me, Sean Woods at the home office, the safety department, or a member of the operations team. The other thing I'd like to go over with you is the documentation forms. So we have behind the wheel, range, and road. This is set on a 10-day training. We've lined it up with the syllabus. It may not always line up with the syllabus. One of the things, keynotes to this is to document federally required training. So we cannot make vertical lines all the way through a column. What we can do is make lines through a row. So when we look at proficiency performance codes, if on day 4, a trainee is proficient at left and right flat mirrors, and we put a P in there, we can put a horizontal line through the remainder of those. That says, yes, they've got a P, they've been proficient at that task. What we can't do is do a vertical line through everything, because that indicates the potential of pencil whipping and fraudulent documentation. So if we take a look at this, we want to make sure some things for a daily check. They've got their permit with them, because once we get to road, their regular license doesn't stand alone. They've got to have their permit with them to operate a commercial vehicle. They need to have their driver's license, because they should have a temporary permit. So they have to have their paper permit and their physical driver's license together. A medical card. Do they have proper footwear? No open-toed, open-heeled shoes. This is one thing we can reinforce with them every time. Also, ask them each day, let me see your driver's license. If they have an A restriction, they need to have glasses on, or if they wear contacts, they need to have their contacts in. And we need to remind them of these things every single day. Then it's far less likely that month 1, when they're by themselves on a school bus, they're wearing flip-flops, because we've checked them every day and we've reinforced to them no open-toed or open-heeled shoes on a bus. Then we get down into the individual items where they demonstrate proficiency. Pre-trip, reference points. This is all range in a controlled environment, right turns, left turns, and then skills. Then we come down day 7, based on our 10-day, they start road. So it's a separate section that we document road on, right? The reason we put that into the second page is it provides a clear distinction between range and road. Range is a controlled environment. Road is out on the road with other motorists. If they don't do a particular skill in range that day, and they haven't reached proficiency, it needs to have an X for not applicable. If it's something we're still working on, it needs to have an N. We can't leave blank spaces. So these forms need to be filled out completely. Another item, and these are set up horizontally, is document what they're training on each day. In a perfect world, they're training on the same bus every day. And you may think that at your location, we only train on conventional C2s, but this form is going to be used at multiple locations. Some locations are Head Start only, and they only have type A, smaller baby buses that are commonly referred to, vans, or sometimes they're called. So this one form serves as a documentation form for every location, regardless of the type of operation they have. So we need to document the type of vehicle, the amount of time spent on training. So task code A, B, or C, that's explained up here. A is an entry-level driver trainee. That's somebody that's never held a CDL or never had an S endorsement. They would be an entry-level driver trainee. If it's somebody that already has a Class B with an S endorsement, they would be a B. And then C other is any other types of situations that we could come across that we haven't thought of right now would be a C. Reason that's important is if somebody's got a task code of A, it would be expected that they would have all 10 days of training documented with the full number of hours spent training. If they're a task code B, they would have less days of documentation. They may only have 2 or 3 days documented where they went through the modules, you did 8 hours of training each day, whatever that may be. So start time, end time, those are for behind the wheel only. That's not for classroom or theory training. So if we did range training and we started at 10:30 and then we went to road and we ended our training at noon, it'd be 10:30, end time noon, total time spent on training 1.5 hours. Vehicle type A is a van, type A baby bus. C is a conventional. D is a transit bus or a flat nose or snub nose or whatever your location terminology is for those. We have to document the asset code of the vehicle we trained in, the type of brakes. You may only train on hydraulic brake buses at your location because you don't have any air brake buses, but other locations do. It is a federal requirement that we document the brake type that we train on. And then it's just real quick, what do we do that day? Range only, we click range. Range and road, we'd select them both. And then we initial on each day. It's important that we fill these out each day once training is concluded. We don't wait until after the trainee has gotten their CDL and go back through and backdate and try to remember everything we trained on each day. An important element to this entry-level driver training is we document training each day. So once you wrap up and you finish with your trainee, you let them know what they're doing for homework, go back through, sit down, document that day's training. An important note, these are lined up with the behind the wheel trainer's guide in order of each section. So you could have this as you're doing range, have your guide right there with you, have your documentation sheet. It tells you what proficiency is, what failure is. If they're proficient, hit a P. If it's failure, they still need improvement. Put an N in that line item as you go through. The same thing for road. It's in order as the behind the wheel guide goes. And then at the end, once all rows have achieved proficiency, each of you signs on the form. And this is to provide the documented training for 10 days. If a trainee goes on and they need additional days of training, it's a second sheet. On the second sheet, we need to document the days. So don't be afraid to mark out the 2 and put an 11, 12, 13, whatever it takes. And the same on here. And that's why under these days, you need to write in the day number. So if we don't start range until day 2, day 3, this would start at day 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. If we need, again, if we need additional sheets, use additional sheets. The next form is the final evaluation form. And as I told you, we're going to use this after they take their CDL exam. And again, you can have your behind the wheel trainer's guide right there with you that tells you what proficiency looks like. Again, we have our daily checks. Do they have their temporary CDL or their CDL? Depending on how long it takes before they come back. Medical card, proper footwear, and then the restrictions on their license. One thing once we get to this point, air brakes are no longer an endorsement. it's a restriction. So if your trainee comes back and they have a restriction on their license for air brakes, we need to check and make sure that they haven't lost any other type of endorsements they have. So if they had a motorcycle, if they were a former Class A driver, tanker, hazmat, anything like that, we also need to check their license, make sure they have a passenger, school bus, the restriction for your state for air brakes, if we didn't train them on air brakes, as a double check, make sure that they're good. One way to sour a new driver is to have their license messed up and us not catch it. Management will check that as well, but as a trainer, you have a key responsibility in ensuring that that person's ready to go as a new driver. So we go through the behind the wheel standards, pre-trip, make them run through it, mirror, make sure they're adjusting their mirrors to them, signals, horns, the whole 9 yards. We're taking them out on the road, checking through everything. If something is not applicable, hit NA, pass or fail. If they fail any options or any items in this, they need additional training. And then at the bottom, as it states, as an Apple Bus Company certified driver trainer, I attest that this trainee has achieved proficiency in all the above standards and has recommended him or her to become a school bus driver, or they have not satisfactorily demonstrated. If it is not satisfactorily demonstrated, as I alluded to before, it's another conversation. We don't just part ways with that person. We have additional conversations with our management team. Maybe another trainer steps in, manager steps in, and a second evaluation process, just because of the investment involved. But we have an opportunity as trainers to really impact the quality of new drivers. That's the takeaway for this. By moving this to after the CDL process, after they've gotten licensed, we can make sure that they're safe to transport students. Another element is a certification, a certificate of completion for every driver that completes our training program. You will get one of these as a certified driver trainer. It's a little different format. The color, the border color is different for driver trainers than it is for driver trainees. So each driver trainee will receive a certificate of completion that they have achieved something special. And we need to let them know routinely throughout this process, you are achieving something special. You're going to be a competent, confident school bus driver at the end of this process. Because once they pass the CDL exam, they are not specifically a school bus driver. They'll have a passenger and school bus endorsement, but what that allows them to do is drive anything commercially. They can drive a trash truck, they can drive anything that's under the weight restrictions for a Class A license. By doing this final evaluation form and giving them the certificate of completion, we are saying that they are now a school bus driver. And we need to really let them know how important they are, how important their continued good attendance is. Let them know throughout this entire process that I may be the best substitute school bus driver in the world, but I am not going to be as good on your route as you are. If I haven't driven your route, but I'm driving it for the first time today, even though I'm the greatest school bus driver in the world, a substitute school bus driver, I don't know the kids' names. I don't know which students can't sit next to each other because yesterday they were best friends, but today they're worst enemies, and they're probably going to fight. I don't know where problematic stops are. I don't know where potholes are, tricky turns, things like that. I'm going to drive much slower. I'm going to be later to stops because we need to let them know that it's never okay to be early to a stop. We can either be on time or late. If we're going to be late, especially more than 10 minutes, we shouldn't be the only ones that know it. We should let our manager, our dispatchers, however that structure is at your location, know. But all those things play in for substitute drivers. We're going to cover the downsides of courtesy stops in the modules, unapproved stops, stops that nobody knows about but that regular route driver, which puts a substitute driver in a very precarious situation. All of these things, these new drivers are going to have, and we're going to have the ability as trainers to teach them before they ever step on to a bus by themselves to transport students. It's an awesome responsibility. We're all up to the task. We all understand how valuable school bus drivers are to the education of today's youth. If you have any questions with phase 2, please reach out to your local management team, reach out to me at the home office, and we'll do our best to get you whatever resources you need to make sure that you can train drivers, keeping with this new program. Thank you for attending this phase 2 training module. I appreciate your attendance. I appreciate what you do. I understand this is a monumental undertaking for many. There's a lot of information. It's going to take time to process it. The expectation is you're not going to be the perfect trainer day one. It's going to carry the behind the wheel guide with you. Watch the modules. You may have to watch a couple of modules multiple times to be proficient with it. Don't be afraid to go into the extra training session that we covered in phase 1 to rewatch items that you want to learn the terminology more, become more confident in the material. But in time, this will become the new normal. This will become the expectation for all veteran drivers. But we really have an opportunity to impact the safety of students. And at the end of the day, that's why we all do this. So thank you and have a great day.